All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Meetings with Masters. I'm here tonight with a beautiful soul and a dear friend of mine, Jacqueline Franchetti. Jacqueline is the founder of the Kyra Franchetti Foundation. She is the mother of the beautiful soul who was tragically killed by her own father. And it is beyond horrific story. Jacqueline has risen above that and is making an impact, a huge impact in helping to educate people about child abuse and help to eradicate it. We're working, she's working hard to get laws passed to put people away that need to be put away, to get children out of the hands of abusers in their life and in their family. And she's making, and I'm going to let her tell all about that because she's really making waves. And so welcome, Jacqueline. And thank you for being here.
Gina, first of all, thank you so much for giving me some time on your amazing platform. You've had fantastic, amazing guests. It is an absolute honor and pleasure to be with you. And thank you for the opportunity. And it's been great being your friend and getting to know you and watching you do this. So I am thrilled for you and again, humbled to be here.
Oh, thank you. That is so kind. And yes, we became friends a little over a year ago, and I'm so grateful to know you because you're a beautiful soul. And I wondered, would you tell us more about, as you know, I first connected with you as a mother who lost a child, and I felt your heart, I felt your soul, I felt your pain, but I can't even imagine that kind of pain that you must have gone through having her been murdered by her own father. I just can't. So whatever you're willing to share, Jacqueline, I invite you to share what you.
Thank you. And, I think it's important for everyone to know, first of all, that Kyra's murder was 100% preventable. And what happened to Kyra, what happened to me, unfortunately, can happen to someone you know or love unless changes are made. And if we enact common sense changes, nothing radical, common sense changes, things can change overnight. And let me take a step back for a moment and just tell everybody about Kyra.
Oh, please do.
Kyra was 28 months old. She was a fiercely independent toddler, and let me emphasize fiercely. She loved Elmo and Mickey Mouse and puppies. If there was a dog on the street, my gosh, she was right up next to them, petting them every single time. She was a total daredevil. On the swings, she wanted to go fast. She couldn't go high enough. She constantly was asking to go faster and faster. And on the slide, she would just barrel right on down. And, on the very last day that I had with her, she had just learned to roll down a hill. And she was very, very proud of this latest accomplishment. And she pulled me outside. She rolled down just a few times and she got up and she went, ta-da! And, she was just so excited that she had learned this new skill. And
I could feel it. I feel it.
She was amazing. I mean, she was the type of child that just went into any room, whether it was a restaurant or anywhere else, and just everyone would just start smiling because her laughter, her giggle, her smile, her presence was just so contagious. And everyone knew her. And in fact, I was known as Kyra's mom. I didn't have a first name anymore because everyone knew Kyra. When you went to the park, when you went to the pizza place, everyone knew Kyra, and I was just known as Kyra's mom. And I couldn't have been more proud of her.
Oh, I bet. Oh, she sounds absolutely amazing and like an old soul because she immediately energetically connected with people.
She did. And she was just fantastic. In fact, the last weekend I had with her, we were living in Long Island and we were in Port Washington and they had sprinklers in the park. And she was giggling so loud, people from the street could hear her. And as one father and his son approached, he looked, I watched him because I was watching her, but I could see them as they were approaching. And he goes, wow, if you have half as much fun as she's having, and he pointed right at Kyra, he's like, this is going to be fantastic. Because she was just giggling, laughing, silly. And you could just see the other children were just like, you know, wanted to play with her as a result, because it was just that infectious, amazing happiness that she had about her. That was amazing and wonderful.
That is beautiful. I just, when I look at her pictures, I can feel that about her. I see you, I see her face, you know, in you, and I just feel her soul right now. And I know that there's two little girls up there who are no longer, you know, they're, but right at this very moment, they're watching over both of us right now.
And I'm sure they are. I'm sure they found each other, and who knows, you know, they've gotten flying lessons from each other. So
yeah, for sure. I'm sure, you know, I just feel like just Kyra's presence, and I wonder how much you're willing to share about what happened after that last day you were with her, and if you're, you know, whatever you want to share, we're listening.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, Kyra was 28 months old, and her father took her. In fact, tomorrow is the 4-year anniversary of the last day I saw her alive. Monday is the 4-year anniversary of her murder. And she was taken on a visit by her father to Virginia. He shot her twice in the back while she slept. He then proceeded to pour gasoline all over his home. He set fire to it, and he killed himself. And none of this should have happened. Her murder was 100% preventable. He murdered her as a form of revenge against me, to hurt me. And he did. We were going through a custody case in Nassau County at the time. And we had been in family court since she was only a few weeks old. And I can sit here, Gina, and I can tell you that I did absolutely everything that you're supposed to do. I left an abusive relationship. I got out when I was pregnant to keep her safe. And throughout the entire court case, there were numerous times when anyone could have gotten involved. And had they, she would be alive today. Every red flag was going up. And things were progressively getting worse each and every time that we returned to court. And despite that, instead of decreasing visits or recommending supervised visits, they increased access to her. And let me share with you and give you just a glimpse of going through family court. And like I mentioned, what happened to me, what happened to Kyra can happen to someone you know or love unless changes are made. The first time that I walked into court, I thought, like you would or anyone else, you know, if you heard even just some of the stories that had happened while I was pregnant with her, that there's no way any judge would allow him to have access to her. And instead of me being on offense, at the very first time that I went into court, I was on defense. And what happens in family court right now is it's set up to protect the abuser and not the child.
Why?
And this has to change. And to give you just, let me drop into another moment this, just to share with you something. And let me share with you just statistics around this. This is happening far too often. Kyra is one of over 740 children to be murdered by a mom or a dad during a custody case, divorce, or separation.
Oh,
this is horrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrible. And it keeps happening. In fact, just a few days ago in Indianapolis, there was a 10-year-old boy who knew his father was going to kill him. He was still forced to go on the visit. Protective services were called, and he was not protected.
What?
This happens time and time and time again.
Oh, he must have told somebody my dad's going to kill me.
He told his mother, and she called the authorities, and nothing happened. We are not protecting our child. We've completely lost sight of our child. Instead, we protect the abuser. And that has to change.
Yes, it does.
And I wouldn't have known that it was happening. And I'm not surprised that most people, unless you've gone through the family court process, you would think that they would protect the child. We would hope that they would protect the child. They do not. And when you look at the numbers, as awful as the child murders numbers are, I want to expand this out, because the number of children who are court ordered into the home of a mom or a dad who is abusing them physically, sexually, or emotionally, these numbers are astronomical. 58,000 children each year. That means today there are 500,000 children who are terrified to be in the home that they're quarantined in. They're court ordered to be there. They cannot move.
It's hard. When I thought about when this happened with COVID, I thought about that. That's what I thought about. I don't know. I can't even imagine.
And this is, and especially if you look at COVID, you know, when children went to school, they had the ability to at least get out of that house and get into an environment that could have been safe for them, or even be able to report things to the teachers or to other people who are mandated reporters. That is not an avenue that they can take anymore. So the situation with COVID is making things incredibly more dire. And you know, we won't know things until, unfortunately, we come out of this situation. So this is making what was already an epidemic before the pandemic even worse. And, you know, when you look at custody cases, just to give you a sense of how messed up it is right now, 70% of abusers are getting custody of the child. 70% nationwide. This tells you that something is completely wrong, and we need to change this desperately.
There's no reason for that. That just seems, it's just unheard of. How
it's failing time and time and time again. And the number of people, even I get contacted all the times by moms and by dads who are scared for their child, but they can't speak up because if they do, they're afraid of the repercussions from the judge or someone else in the court for them speaking out. So it's really a horrible situation to be in. And let me give you a glimpse of what happened in Kyra's case and where people could have stepped in to protect her.
Right, especially if you were fighting it when you were pregnant already. Like, how did that, okay, please.
Yeah, so the first time that I went to court, you know, I had been stalked, I had been harassed, threatened, I was cussed at in front of Kyra by him repeatedly. And I mean, emotional abuse, coercive control. And instead of the judge saying that something's wrong here, she yelled at me to grow up.
What?
Yes. Everyone who was involved in the case knew from day one that he was suicidal. Day one. And no one did anything about it. As we went through the court case, we had Child Protective Services involved. Even though they noted in his report that he had extreme anger and rage issues, an inability to care for Kyra, that he was cussing at me, threatening me, stalking us, harassing us. I mean, everything under the book that was happening. They've put in the report, there's quote unquote no DV, meaning no domestic violence, and that it's unfounded. And that it was low risk. I would like to know what's high risk in these scenarios.
Why? Like broken arms, broken legs, like what?
You'll have to ask them. You know, and if you look at, in domestic violence, they have what's called the power and control wheel. If you look at it, the half of the wheel was lit up, but they still classified this as low risk. Then we had an attorney for the child who was involved. And this person's supposed to represent Kyra's best interest. I begged him repeatedly to get more involved, including 5 days before she was murdered, and he refused.
What? Wait, you hired him to protect her. How could he refuse?
He refused. And then we had what's called a forensic evaluator. Now, these are very common in custody cases. And when people hear forensic evaluators, they almost think like CSI or something like that. This is not what they are. They're psychologists, social workers who are supposed to evaluate the family and determine what's best for the child. In my report, he recommended joint custody, even though he knew and sought documented evidence of the abuse. And at this time, things had already started to trickle over to Kyra, and he recommended joint custody because he thought that a father should always play a role in a child's life. Well, he's correct. Her father did play a role in Kyra's life. He killed her. And at our last hearing, where they ordered or granted overnight visits with him and Kyra, the judge said to me, this is quote unquote not a life or death situation.
Oh my gosh.
And she yelled at me to grow up again. And because of her, Kyra will never grow up. And this is what's happening in family court in every state, in every county, in every courthouse. And this needs to change. And the reason why I've been so active is because I firmly believe that change can happen. Change can be a reality. We can have a court system that protects our child, that uses common sense and makes changes to make sure that they're protected.
Yes.
And we don't have to do things that are radical. We need to do a few things. And if we do those, overnight things can change. So as you know, I've been very active since Kyra's murder. And in fact, the first law that I passed was 6 months after she was taken. And after that, I worked with a federal resolution specifically on family court and child custody cases. And this is where we can employ common sense. And what the resolution asks is three things, simple things. So number one, to make child safety the top priority in custody cases, something that you would think is happening, but actually isn't in reality. We have out there what's called best interest factors. And there are, depending on the state, there are a number of different best interest factors. But they don't weight it so that child safety is the top one. You need to determine if the child's safe in whichever house you're going to be placed in before you go anywhere else.
Yeah. What happened to doing things in the child's best interest?
Best interest has become watered down. And unfortunately, abusers have been able to make it in their own best interest.
Why is that? I mean, you have lawyers and you have really good lawyers. I know that we're connected to, and you, I'm sure have others that I don't personally know. Like, what do they say? Why? How did it come to be this way? And
right.
How big of a battle is this going to be for you? Like, it sounds like, we need a huge movement to change this.
We do need a huge movement, and the problems are systemic. And the system is badly broken. And one fix, one Band-Aid here or there isn't going to change it. We need a myriad of different changes. But having some of the things that I'm just talking about, like making child safety the top priority, will actually be a huge step forward in custody cases.
Why
and
is that? I'm sorry.
Like, because there are other elements that they also can look at. And that's not built into the statute. And that's what I'm trying to change. So once we can do this, and unfortunately we do need to legislate it, because the court system themselves, the judicial branch, is not doing it. So we need to go in and fix this. Well, so child safety, number one, first priority. This is something we can do. It's easy. The second thing we need to do is training. Everyone involved in these cases needs to be better trained. And I'll look at New York State for just a moment, because this is where I obviously have the most amount of experience and knowledge around, but this is happening in all 50 states. So those forensic evaluators, for example, the psychologists that evaluate these cases, do you know how many hours they're required to have training?
I'm afraid to ask.
6. You need more hours to get a license in New York State than to do a forensic evaluation.
Wow.
6.
That's really sad. Wow. That's really terrible.
The training for judges on domestic violence is horrible. They do not understand it. And there's a lot of things that happen when especially victims walk in the way that we communicate. We're not strong communicators with victims. We're trauma ridden. We don't talk somewhat logically, where we get timelines off when we speak. And you went through a trauma with your daughter, and we don't communicate as well. Whereas abusers, by the way, this is their own personal chess set. Yeah. And the more stress that's placed on the other person, the stronger they feel. So they come across as being calm, cool, and collected. And then the non-offending parent is scared to death for their child and doesn't come across well as a result.
Right, because then they're coming across as a victim, right?
Right.
Which, even though there's two victims, the parent and the child that is the actual victim. And unfortunately, when we are seen as that, it's looked down upon. And
yep.
We're fighting, right? So we're in fight or flight, right? So that
you run from a court, so you're stuck there. And so what happens is many people go into the third phase, which is freeze, and they don't know how to deal with this.
Freeze.
And you're now just stuck in a trauma frozen state. So you don't come across well. And what also happens is many people are pro se, which means that they represent themselves. And now they're not coming across well, and the judge holds it against them at trial. And if you're trained and if you're trauma informed, you would actually notice these signs and recognize them. But without being properly trained, you're not going to recognize the signs. And one other thing that happens that needs to change is that courts don't recognize that even though the other parent has abused the other parent,
right,
they don't take that as a factor, which is ridiculous, because when you look at research, there's a clear line between, if you're going to abuse the other parent, you are also going to abuse the child at some point.
Right.
But they don't even look at that. The number of times that I was told, well, just because he abused you doesn't mean that he's going to abuse the child. I mean, all of a sudden you enter into what feels like a twilight zone in family court.
I can only imagine, just thinking of it. I'm sitting here thinking, gosh, like the task force they created for like Homeland Security. I'm like, we need home security, because everything we do, the people we are, and the people that become the bad people out in the world, it started from their home, from their childhood, from their. So we need, so these people need that training so they can make the impact in the courtroom and protect people. It's infuriating, and it's I'm thank God that you are leading a force for this, because you are a force for good, and you're very inspiring in that you are able to take your pain and your massive catastrophe, like and do something good with it. And so where are you at right now with all of that? I mean, where are things now?
So now in New York State, I'm working on 3 bills to better protect children. And it goes around these 3 things that really stem from the congressional resolution: making child safety the top priority, making sure everyone who is involved in these cases is properly trained. And the third element, which I didn't talk about yet, is that we need to use the best research when evaluating these cases. So for example, the Centers for Disease Control have something called the ACE study, and that's adverse childhood events. And it puts you on a scale, and when you're on the scale, and it shows where you are in terms of your ACE score. And it can determine even how much your life expectancy is going to decrease based on the amount of abuse that you've been exposed to. And it's the gold standard of research. It's it's a huge study. They've done other elements of this. It's amazing what they've been able to do with this. Our court system is not using it. Instead, they're using outdated research from the 1980s that no longer applies. So everything that I'm doing in New York State is about putting together a common sense approach to child custody cases, getting people trained, making child safety the top priority, making sure that we're putting the child first, and we're using the best research. And 3 bills are coming out about this. One is actually I'm very grateful to say it is named after Kyra. It's being called Kyra's Law. And it is, and it's legislation that I hope to see, these three pieces, I hope to see go not just in New York, but in every state. They'll have to be tweaked based on the laws in each state. But we can take these forward. We can make these changes. And by the way, it's not just the states, it's happening in other countries too. So I would love to see this expand and go worldwide and make changes.
Of course. How do we make it, like, how do you, right now you're starting in New York, and that's where you have your tragedy, and how do we take this, you know, to the government so that it goes across the board?
First, we got to get it worked out in New York, make sure it works. And, you know, whenever you do any type of legislation, the big thing that you're always looking for is making sure there's no unintended consequences. So everything that we're doing, we are literally walking through every word that's in these documents to make sure that it really does protect the child and doesn't give the abusers another opportunity to hurt a child. So we're doing really a lot of vetting with our materials to make sure that they're appropriate and that they're going to work. And then we need to get in New York State. And after that, we're going to figure out a way to go into other states as well.
Okay. Wow. Well, it's funny. ACE, you know, last week I interviewed Catherine Wilson, Catherine Wilson, and she mentioned ACE, and that was the first I had heard of it, because I've never dealt with anything like this, you know, thank God. But I don't understand why they're not looking at that. That just doesn't, doesn't make sense. That in this day and age, we're dealing, you know, you have it there, and they're not looking at it.
No, and there's a common misconception that's out there that, you know, abusers are mentally ill. And let me just clear this up right now. You know, Kyra's father wasn't abusing alcohol or drugs. He was not mentally ill, or at least wasn't deemed that way by the forensic evaluator. He's an abuser. And abusers are all about power and control. Now, there are abusers who are mentally ill, but you don't necessarily need to be mentally ill to be an abuser. And we keep mixing these up in society, and that's a problem, because they're really two completely different things. Power and control is simply about that. How do you exert and control the other person? And we need to make sure that the courts can recognize those differences.
So wouldn't you say that an abuser is mentally ill, but they might not be labeled? Or no, you're not?
You do not need to be mentally ill to be an abuser. No, it is not. It is not in the DSM-5, which is the major book on any type of psychological disorder. That's not part of what abuse is. Abuse is power and control.
Which to me
control manipulation. Right. But you do not need to be mentally ill to do that.
Right. I hear what you're saying. I'm saying is I feel as though it, you know, I would label them as mentally ill. Just forget all.
And I understand, but it's completely different. And you know, this was in just looking at Kyra's murder, for example, this was thought out and planned. I know from the day that he started. I know from the day when he purchased the guns.
And how do you know he purchased them? Oh, you found out later when he purchased them, obviously.
Yeah.
Why did you had to let him have her every other weekend, or what? I mean,
so he was here every other weekend. And Kyra and I were living in New York. He was living in Virginia. So he would come up and visit her. And the courts recommended that he take her to Virginia. So he took her to Virginia, and that's where he killed her.
Oh my goodness.
And there's nothing, you know, and you know, some horrible trolls after her murder said, "How could I let her go?" It was a court order.
Yeah, no
I don't have control over these things. This was written into the court documents and put on the record. You know, my choice, and this is the choice that other parents, non-offending parents, safe parents face. We have to turn over our child, or we're in violation of a court order, which means that we can ultimately lose custody for not turning over our child.
Right.
We don't have choices here.
And I can only imagine that handing her over, how that must, I can't imagine how that must have
It's
felt.
horrible. Every single time it was horrible. And I still remember she didn't want to go the last time that I turned her over. And, you know, that's because, you know, she's going to an abusive environment.
She knew.
You know, this is a man who did not have, according to CPS, had an inability to care for her. This is what our courts gave access to.
Are allowing.
Yeah. And there's a mindset among the courts that, you know, a child needs both the mother and father in their life. And if both are safe parents, I would agree with them. But what they have to start recognizing is that when you go through family court, most of these cases, by the way, are going to settle outside of court. When you have two safe, non-offending parents, most of those, the vast majority, are going to settle outside of court. Family court is not a place you want to be.
Mm.
The ones that stay there, according to studies, are 70 to 75% have domestic violence attached to them. And the courts are treating these cases, the ones that they perceive as being domestic violence, as smaller in number instead of the vast majority. And they have to change this mindset. They have to recognize what's in front of them is more often than not a domestic violence case. And they need to start thinking about ways to best protect the child, which by making child safety the top priority starts to make a difference here.
Mm-hmm. It almost sounds to me like they can't read the signs at all. Or, you know.
They're using the wrong tea leaves. And we shouldn't be using tea leaves. We should be using silence. We should be using ACE. We have the tools. That's the thing, is we have the research. We have the tools. But if you're not trained in it and you don't understand it, you're never going to make the right assessment.
No. Wow. Wow. So I can't even, my heart is like pounding. I'm like, it's just so beyond heartbreaking, but I know that it takes people like you to change it. And that that Kyra's legacy is for you, her mom, to make the impact here and to make the difference. And you are, and that's just like, that's so amazing and so powerful. And what is it that you want people to know the most? Well, let me ask you this quick question. It just came back to me. I wanted to ask you before. Is it 1 in 4 children are abused, or like even smaller than that?
If you look at national statistics, yes, 1 in 4. Breakouts if you go by sex and gender, and the numbers are higher for girls than it is for boys.
I would think so, because I would think that it also becomes sexual abuse and all the horrors.
Yes. Yeah, and those are horrible numbers. Yes.
So, and we have to change it. I want to help you be a force for good. I want people out there to know what they can do to help. What do you want people to know the most that they can? What are some things people can look at? How can people make a difference in their everyday lives, if that's possible? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's you know, and every time that I talk about this, and I was on a conference call just this morning, and after I told what, you know, the focus of the Kyra Franchetti Foundation and what I'm working on, she immediately piped in and said, I was involved in a very similar case, and my children are now older, but they were thankfully ended up being safe. But she goes, that was, you know, that was luck. We shouldn't be relying on luck when it comes to the custody of our children. And I'm stopped in the grocery store, even sometimes the doctor's offices. This is happening so often. And I get phone calls from friends of friends, you know, and what I want people to know is it's not going to stop until we change this legislatively. So in addition, by the way, to the Kyra Franchetti Foundation, I also have a sister organization called Kyra's Champions. And this is where we do our advocacy work.
Okay.
And, you know, first of all, what people need to do is, you know, go on our social media and please join it, because we need to amass larger numbers for people to see and recognize us. So that's a very easy first step.
Absolutely.
Number 2, when we do have the legislation fully up and going, we will need letters being written. So, you know, we'll have quick and easy click and go. But then if you could share it on your platforms, that would be amazingly helpful for us to get word out and get more involvement around that. And then, first of all, we are charities, so any donation does help. I know it's very difficult right now because of COVID, but the more that we can do is, definitely tied to how much we can raise. So any fundraisers out there, or people who are looking at different things, we would love that. We are doing one fundraising campaign on Monday, and Gina, I know you're participating. Thank you for doing that. The symbol for child abuse is the blue pinwheel. And Kyra should be 6 years old. So people on Monday are putting out in their front lawns, or if they don't have a front lawn, somewhere prominent in their apartment or someplace where you can see it, they're putting up 6 pinwheels for Kyra, and they're going to tag us on social media with this. And, the one thing that I have learned is anytime that I talk about this, not only do I find out about more people and more victims, unfortunately, but it raises awareness. And people don't recognize that, we hear domestic violence, and especially we'll see these child murders on the news and we'll just turn it off, or we'll listen to the next story and we'll think of it, oh, that was an awful event and how horrible. Well, it is an awful event and it is horrible, but unfortunately it is going to happen to you or someone you know and love unless we make changes. So one thing I want us to start getting more comfortable about is talking about domestic violence and not shying away from it. Because, what I've asked people in the past to do on what is Kyra's anniversary, I call it her Angel Day, is to talk about it. Even though, yes, it's horrible, it makes people cry, it breaks my heart that she's not here. I cry every single day, multiple times a day. My heart's always in pieces. But talk about it. Don't shy away from it. It's pervasive throughout our society. It's happening too often. And if we get more comfortable talking about it, then more people will come forward. And the more that we can start to make this, people recognize how big of a problem this is, the more we can do about changing it. And then maybe, Gina, we can do what you talked about and getting a huge task force and getting people to recognize this. But people tend to talk about this still and keep it in the closet. We need to make this more well known. So, and I've been very fortunate about getting a number of placements in the media and being on various programs. There was, in fact, the Albany Times-Union did a huge, major 4-part series just on the problems of New York State Family Court. Now, that was unheard of. They never did this type of investigative story. 4-part series, in total was over 60 pages. And it wasn't just on Kyra, it was on a number of cases in New York State. But we need to get more coverage, more people talking about this. And that's where change is going to happen.
Okay, absolutely, and we can support. I put the link for Kyra's foundation in the original post today about this broadcast, and at the very, your main focus with the foundation is, just say the mission again. And let's,
So with the Kyra Franchetti Foundation, it's about raising awareness both inside and outside the family court system about family violence and making sure that child safety becomes the top priority. With Kyra's Champions, we are looking at advocacy efforts to make changes to better protect children in child custody cases.
We need to do this. We need to make this impact. So, I'm just beyond honored. Before I start to wrap this up, is there anything else you want to share about what you're doing in the world, how to make a bigger impact? Is there anything else?
Just one quick thing. I'll drop into it just for a few moments, but I do have a for-profit company. It is called Message to Momentum. And one of the programs that I am going to be championing and starting in the fall is to help other parents who want to make legislative changes to help coach them to do that. Because there's a lot that I've learned over the last 4 years. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a lobbyist, I'm not a legislator. I've had to learn it as I went. But there are ways that you can be very successful and impactful as someone who may have gone through a painful event, something that you've gone through, something that I've gone through, and how you can take that pain and turn it into a passion. And there are, these are the warriors that we need making changes across all different spectrums in our country. I firmly believe, or I would not be doing this, that we can make changes in family court. I absolutely know that we can. I do not believe that child safety is complicated. I think we can make it work. We can use a common sense approach, and we can make changes. And there are other people who are out there who I know want to do the same. And if you do want to have anybody reach out to me, and I'll get you ready for when we launch a platform on that.
Okay. That would, I mean, I think the message to momentum is great. I'm sorry, I don't know what that background noise is. I don't know what that is. It almost sounds like birds.
All of a sudden we're getting a StreamYard wind. It's kind of nice, like a summer breeze coming in here or something.
So strange. To me, it sounded like a bunch of cicadas. And there's no noise in my space here, and I don't think there's anything here. So that last part that you said, I actually missed it because of the loud cicadas or whatever. The
breeze that's coming through on our call. But again, if there's any mom or dad who's out there, and even a child, but someone who is thinking about how can they make a legislative change, something that may have been a painful moment on something like you went through and what I've gone through. If you want to take your pain and turn it into a platform, I'm going to be offering a course around this to help you understand how to do just that.
That is so important. And then that's, that when we can take our pain and turn it into making an impact in the world and making a difference for humanity, making, being a part of the greater good and turn it into the passion that makes a difference. Yeah. That is really powerful, guys. That is superpowers right there. And it's going to be impactful. This is going to help people learn how to, I can't wait to hear all about it, honestly. And I know not only is it going to help people in this situation that you've been in to help, train them to whatever it is, to notice things, it's just going to help people to make an impact in the world. And I'm grateful. Yeah.
Everyone's capable of doing it. Everyone is.
Yes.
And, I did not have a background. I did not have knowledge. I learned as I went. And there's no book that's out there that says, here's how to go, create a law. It's a lot of work. But if you're ready to roll up your sleeves and do it, I can help you figure out a path forward to go about it.
Yes. Well, that is really great. And I don't know why we're frozen, but we can still hear it.
I can see myself when we're frozen. I'm not sure what's going on. We have a breeze and now we're frozen. I'm not sure.
I don't know either. We're being told to wrap it up, I think. For some reason, maybe we're, the universe is playing with us. But anyway, we can still be heard. So yeah. So thank you. That's going to be powerful. I want to make sure I get all the links that you want people to see, and I will put them in here. And Jacqueline, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Gina. Oh my gosh, for your time, your energy, your amazing platform that you've created. And thank you. Oh, and you're moving again. I can see you now.
Here we are.
But thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation. This has been so much. I'm honored, and thank you.
I'm honored, and you're very inspiring, and I'm here to be a force for good to make that impact with you. So thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And please keep an eye out for all of the links that I'm going to add here. Have a good night.
Thanks.